Can I begin by welcoming you all to this Zoom meeting, the last of the talks which have been organised by the Greenwich Society during the COVID lockdown period. Most of them, including this one, were organised, of course, by Richard Butt, who has done an amazing job over the last 6 months in running the Greenwich Society. And it's a sadness that he's resigned both as the Vice Chairman of the Greenwich Society and as the planning advisor to the Society. But I'm only too happy to act as the acting chairman until the annual general meeting in the autumn. And I'm delighted that John Evans, who's going to take part in this evening's event, is serving as Vice Chairman. I'm speaking to you from the Lake District, where the Wi-Fi connection is not that strong. So what John and I have agreed is that I will introduce Jane and he will deal with the questions and answers after her address. The way of notifying John that you have a question is primarily by the chat function, which even I can manage now. So if you have a question as the evening develops, do enter that chat question and John will pick it up. There is another way in which you can indicate that you have a question by raising your hand, and that I think will give a visual recording symbol, which again, John will be able to pick up. So that's the format for this evening's event. And I'm delighted now formally to introduce Jane Harrington as our speaker this evening. Jane became Vice Chancellor at the University of Greenwich in December 2019. And she'd only been in that position, of course, for 3 months before COVID struck. And the life of the university was closed down to a considerable extent. It's a measure of the competence and dedication of Jane and her team that the life of the university has continued throughout the COVID period. And in some respects, and I speak from personal knowledge here in relation to the law department, there have been considerable successes within the department, even during the COVID period. The Greenwich Society has enjoyed a very good relationship with the university and with its Vice Chancellor since the university took over the old Royal Naval College and acquired the finest and most historic university campus in London. And it's still great to see the old Royal Naval College thronged with students rather than the rather sterile environment which existed when the Navy held those unique buildings.
Oh, you can't say that, come on.
Well, I do say that I thought they were, they had the historic links, but we were allowed in only on Sunday afternoons between, I think, 2 and 4, whereas now you can go in at any time and enjoy those buildings at close view. The first Vice Chancellor was Rick Traynor, who in fact, Jane, joined the committee of the Greenwich Society and made a number of lasting friends during his time at Greenwich before moving on, firstly to King's College, London, and then to Exeter University. And he was followed as Vice Chancellor by Tessa Blackstone and by David Ormrod, under both of whose tenures the university has flourished. And when the restrictions are lifted, it will be great for us all to enjoy the students' involvement in the life of Greenwich, because I think, although the average age of the committee, Jane, is slightly above the student age, we are all so pleased that those buildings are used by the university. Jane is now a resident of Greenwich, having moved to Earlswood Street, and she's a member of our guerrilla gardening group, working in the Walnut Tree Road Garden. That's splendid as well. She came to Greenwich from the University of Bristol, where she was the Deputy Vice Chancellor and Provost. And she's served in higher education, both in this country and abroad, for some 28 years. At Bristol, at the University of the West of England, she played a leading role in securing the university's improved performance in the National Student Survey, which is the measure by which the students measure the success of a university, and also achieving gold in the teaching excellence assessments. So if you keep the students happy and you maintain and improve the academic standards of a university, it seems to me that you are a formidable operator. Jane has had numerous external positions, including chairing a large multi-academy trust in the West of England, and an involvement in an organization which I looked up and which I thought was extraordinarily interesting, called 91 Ways, which was a community-based organization in Bristol, linking the 91 languages which are spoken by residents of that city and bringing them together as diverse communities through, for instance, an enjoyment of food and telling stories about their communities and their backgrounds. Those are only a snapshot of the very many organizations and positions which Jane has held within the higher education field. I hope that in the future, Jane, your involvement with the Greenwich Society will feature as one of the marks of distinction that you have acquired over your years in academe. Enough of me waffling on. I'm delighted to introduce you to Jane Harrington, the University of Greenwich Vice Chancellor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you very much for your kind words there. And thank you to everybody actually for inviting me to speak. What I'm going to try to do over the next half an hour is talk a little tiny bit about myself, not very much, a lot about the university. And I gather you're very interested to know sort of what's been going on during COVID and how we've been coping. So I've got something around that. And then I want to finish off with giving you a flavour of the strategy that we're refreshing at the moment to 2030. So you get a sort of sense of the direction that we're going in. And please do ask any questions. I'm very happy to answer any. And I think where I'd want to start is just really to say that, you know, the thing about Greenwich University is that we're really proud of where we're located. We're really proud of the place and the communities that we're in and that we share with our local residents. And I'd be delighted to be part of Greenwich Society because I hold a very strong view that universities have to play a civic role and have to be embedded and be actually there for their regions. So I think it's fantastic. The location of the university enables us to do that. And we're fully committed to delivering opportunities and prosperity to people within our communities. Now, if I just go to a tiny bit about myself, Tim, thank you for your kind words, but just to say a tiny bit, I mean, my background was in a business school. I headed up a very large business and law school. It was the 4th largest in the country. And I then went from that to becoming the Deputy Vice Chancellor and Provost at UE Bristol. And that role was a fantastic role. It was the Vice Chancellor there was very external facing. So I ran the university for him internally, and that enabled me to do, you know, things such as get the Teaching Excellence Framework to gold, etc. But one of the things I always said was that I was very happy there, and I would only consider leaving if it was a university that I felt I would be very happy in, and I could make a difference. And Greenwich actually was the first university where I really felt that was true. What attracted me to Greenwich University was the diversity of the students and staff. It was the fact we've got 3 campuses, which I think really brings with it lots of challenges, but huge opportunities. And it was also the fact that although the university is, as you rightly say, Tim, is in a very good position, there's also scope to be even better. And I was really keen that actually I wanted to come somewhere where I could make a difference. And I'm really excited. I took a decision to move my family here. And for me, it's really important that I live within the region that I'm working in. And I think, and I'm very, very keen to get to know the whole of Greenwich and the region around, and actually really work on how we can genuinely make a difference to people's lives for the better within the region. So if I just tell you, I'm sure you know a lot about Greenwich, but I'm just going to say a few things about it for you. And here we have a slide where on the left-hand side is, as you'll all recognise, is the old Royal Naval College. In the middle is Medway in Kent, and on the right-hand side is one of our buildings at Avery Hill. And in terms of the university itself, it's 55% of our new student intake comes from 40% of the most deprived areas in the country. And 56% of our students are the first generation in their family to enter higher education. Now, I was the first generation, I was the first member of my family to go into higher education. So I do actually recognise that feeling that you have for quite a long time of feeling a bit like an imposter. And I recognise how, and so I've always spent my whole career wanting to actually work with students in that position so that we could really make a difference. Also at Greenwich, over 50% of our students come from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. Stands at about 52% today. Now we've got, for those of you who don't know, we have 4 faculties. So we have a business school, we have a faculty of engineering and science, a faculty of health, human sciences and education, and we have a faculty of liberal arts and social sciences. And within those faculties, we cover a really wide range of subjects. So we go from hard science, science and engineering, pharmaceuticals, right through to training teachers, training midwives, training nurses, training paramedics. We've also got a theatre. We also have architects and landscape urban architects. Obviously, we have law, as Tim's already said. We also have a business school, computer science, and so much more, really. But what distinguishes, I think, Greenwich from some other universities is that a lot of our subjects are professional and technically focused, and our focus is very much about actually developing our students, not just in their subjects, but in their confidence and their resilience, so that they can come out of the university and get the best possible jobs that they can and be the best version of themselves. And on the right-hand side are just some statistics which I thought you might be interested in, to give you a flavour of the sort of how international the university is, and also how well our students do in employability. I mean, obviously this year will be very different for them, it'll be very challenging, but up to date, they've been doing fantastically well. And what that hopefully shows you is that as we went into the pandemic, we were actually in a very strong position, which isn't the case for a number of universities. And I think that's important. So if we go to the pandemic for a few minutes, and if we were, as Tim rightly said, I started in December 2019. My actual 100th day was moving all of the campus from being on campus to being an online provision. And I can tell you that the previous June, when I was interviewed, if you'd asked me how to cope with the pandemic, I'd have thought they were slightly crazy. But clearly, I would have been very wrong. Now, we've obviously moved from a period where we went into lockdown. Then, as like everybody else, we came out of it, and we had a term where we could actually do some form of blended learning. And then we've gone back into lockdown. So I just to talk you a bit through that. As we've come out of the first lockdown, we've followed very carefully the government advice and guidance, and we've made arrangements for our spaces to make them safe for everybody. And just to give you a flavour of what that actually has meant, it's meant that we've purchased and set up hand sanitising stations in front of every building entrance and in every single room. We have given free face masks to all of our students, staff and partners who visit the university. And we've completely reorganised our student timetables and completely reorganised our physical space so that where we could, we would teach it, we've maintained 2 metres, and where we can't, 1 metre plus. And what that's meant, just to give you a sense of the scale of that, it's meant that if you take engineering and science, we've had to convert what the students would have used as a sports hall into an additional lab, just to physically enable that space to happen. And we've also had to look at ventilation. And as you can imagine, we operate in very old buildings where ventilation isn't something that is probably, yeah, it's not the same as, if you like, modern ventilation. And so we've had to, in some cases, we aren't using certain classrooms, but where we are, we've had to actually really focus on how we can actually improve the ventilation throughout. Now, we've also worked really closely with our councils, and what I would want to do is actually say a massive thank you to the Royal Borough of Greenwich, who've been fantastic. I mean, they've supported us throughout. What it's meant, what we have, if you go to any of our sites, you will find that we have a community testing site there. So anybody who is symptomatic from the community can come onto our sites and be tested. And we also have testing sites for people who are not symptomatic. So, and that's, you've probably heard about those lateral flow tests through how they've been conducting those in schools. But what that's meant is that we've been able to test our students and staff who are on campus, who are in our halls, as well as supporting the wider community testing effort. Now, many of you will have also heard the rumours, you know, that you'll have seen how the students coming here in September and the cases that were appearing around the country. We didn't have big outbreaks here. We never at any point had more than 7 students who were testing positive. And the reason for that, I would argue, is because we've taken a lot of precautions, but also we worked really, really closely with the council. And the first time we had a few, the council came in. They first of all came around our halls and gave us some advice on things that we could do to make them even safer. But they brought in a mobile testing unit. We tested every single student in the halls. We self-isolated whole flats of students, and we stopped. We basically broke the transmission very early on. And I'm really grateful to them for that, because I think without that really proactive support, it might have been quite different. We also, throughout the pandemic, prioritised student and staff health and wellbeing. And I was very clear that we needed to do that, and we needed to imagine a moment in time where we would come out of the other end of this, out of the pandemic, and we needed to be in a really good shape as we did. And we have had to furlough staff. So, you know, most of our catering outlets have been shut for months on end, for example. And where we've furloughed, we've topped everybody up to 100% of their salary. And we've been and where staff have been very anxious about coming in, we've organised for them to work from home. And we've tried to manage that as we've gone through. I'm sure we haven't got it right every single moment, but we've tried really hard to be as empathetic as we could be to understanding different people's requirements. And some of that actually has meant that some staff have wanted to come in throughout the pandemic. We've had some staff who find it actually very, very stressful working from home. And we've tried to manage that where we could as well. Now, we have been open throughout. So we've been offering a blended approach to our learning. And we're really aware actually that the experience for students this year is really different. It's different across the whole country. And I know that some of you have asked, you know, what's our recruitment been like? Actually, I think you'll be quite amazed to know, I was certainly amazed, but we actually have recruited more students this year than in the previous 3 years, which seems really counterintuitive. But I think part of that was because we tried to have a package for students. So what we did was we promised them from the outset that they would have some face-to-face learning as long as we were allowed to under government rules. And we promised them that they would have enhanced support. We also promised them that if the government enforced a lockdown, then we wouldn't charge them if they didn't stay in their accommodation. We wouldn't charge them for that period of time. And we've also put a lot of money into our hardship funds, and we've been supporting students. So we've been supporting students both obviously if they're in our accommodation when they're not there, but we've also been actually giving money to students who are in private accommodation who have been desperately in need of support because they haven't got part-time jobs. That's been one of the biggest issues, is the real poverty that we've seen. Now, about 50% of our students are back. They've been back since January, and they're studying subjects that require specific resources. So there might be some of our nursing, our paramedics, our midwives are back, many of them helping on the front line. Also our science students are back where they need laboratories, etc. But in addition to that, we've been offering a huge range of online social activities, and the student union's been working with us on that. And they've been offering events for students throughout. What's been fantastic, I mean, Tim alluded to actually some of the way our staff have worked, but some of the staff have been incredibly innovative, and innovative in actually making sure that the students continue to feel part of the community. And that ranges from virtual reception desks to coffee mornings to, as I say, converting the use of the sports hall, to offering, we've been offered a wellbeing service called Together All, which is a 24/7 service online. We've also, the student union have rung our students last term and this term to actually check on their mental health and wellbeing. And I think all of those things have made a difference. We've also tried to support the local community throughout this period. So a number of departments, just to give you a flavour, a number of departments of the university have printed, produced and sourced items of PPE to help frontline healthcare workers. And the London scrubs, we managed to have large 3D printers. We were printing out patterns for them when they desperately needed them. We've provided a lot of our equipment we loaned out to the local NHS trusts. And we also loaned specialist staff and PhD students to support the use of the equipment. Teaching staff returned to NHS posts at the critical care units, and students have had prolonged placements to support their NHS colleagues. And some of our students, particularly final year students, actually went straight into work very early. We've also had university staff who produced key training material, and one in particular was in our nursing simulation, head of nursing simulation. He produced, when the pandemic first came out, he produced training material that's been used across the whole country, and it did some of the early training for frontline workers. Staff have been using their free time to share their expertise with their immediate communities, and that's ranged quite radically from actually, staff volunteering like everybody else in their communities, through to opening up our kitchens to actually provide food, to giving free language lessons to neighbours. And our scientists have offered their expertise, and we've kept our virology labs open throughout the pandemic. And I've got lots of specific examples of that for anybody who is interested. But I've been really proud actually of the staff and students. I think they've been amazing. And I think they have really genuinely made a difference in the communities. We've also worked really closely with the local authorities and other educational institutions. And so, for example, our local testing site, because we're a large university, we've been able to have these testing sites on our campuses. Some of the local institutions haven't been able to do that, so we've offered them use of our sites, and I think that's really important. We've also worked very closely with the NHS and with Public Health England. The local Greenwich councillors we've been giving them updates weekly, so on the situation in the university, because some of them were very anxious that we might have lots of outbreaks, so we've been informing them. We've been doing quite a lot of work with Justin Greening around how do we actually help our students around social mobility and levelling up as they come out of the pandemic. And we've also been working with some of the local MPs, and on some occasions they've highlighted to us students that hadn't actually come to us, and we've been able to pick that up and help them. And we've tried to work as closely with every single individual student and staff as we can. Now, in terms of our finances, obviously we've had to spend a huge amount on the pandemic. I wouldn't want to underestimate that. And it's been a massive challenge for us, like it has for everyone else. But what we did do was we worked with all of the staff, and I've been very clear that we needed to get through this and come out the other side. And so we asked people very early on to make savings where they could, and to look at only spending on frontline, so students, and essential and absolutely essential activities. And by doing that, we will come out of this in a solid position. And I feel very proud of that, because I don't think that's not the case for every institution. But we are coming through this and out the other side in a really solid position, so we will be able to come out of the pandemic and actually support others to help them, which is I'm really proud of. And I think that is really because Greenwich as a university has worked together. Now, we haven't just been worrying about the pandemic. We've also been working on how do we refresh our strategy and how do we really develop ourselves going forward. So I'm just going to finish with giving you a few slides around our strategy, which we haven't launched yet. We're due to launch it at the end of this month. But I thought you might be interested. I probably got too many slides, so I won't talk to them in great detail, but I just wanted to give you a quick flavour. If we start with our vision is to be the best modern university in the UK by 2030. And if you go to the next, if I go to the next slide, just to say, what does that mean? Basically, Greenwich is part of a group of universities which is often referred to as post-92, because that was when what had historically been polytechnics became universities. And the best modern university currently is in the league tables is about 22nd, well, it is 22nd, and Greenwich has got a way to go to get there, but I believe that we can get there. And what I do know is, having worked in a university where we did move up the league tables quite radically, what it gave students and staff was a real sense of pride of the institution, and it really helped with some of their confidence. And for me, and a modern university to me is really important. I've always worked in this part of the sector. I'm very proud to work in this part of the sector, because it's universities that are passionate about the student experience, that are passionate about research that makes a real impact on lives. And an example of that would be the Natural Resources Institute at Greenwich, where, if I give you one example they do amazing work, but just to give you one example, river blindness in Africa has been eliminated in 11 out of 13 countries. And that is because of the work of the Natural Resources Institute. And that, to me, that's what I mean when I'm saying about making a real impact. And also really focused on knowledge exchange. So in other words, how do we actually enable that knowledge to work for partners, and for partners to bring their knowledge to us and work together to make a real, genuine difference in partnership in the modern world. And what we're calling this is education without boundaries. So just to say that we're a really diverse community of students and staff, diverse in many ways, as I've already said, diverse in terms of ethnicity and race. We're diverse in terms of age. We're diverse in terms of sexuality. We're everywhere you look at the Greenwich, it's diverse, which is fantastic. We also offer a diverse range of academic subjects, and we offer a very diverse range of campus experiences. And also, one of the things you may not be aware of is that we have nearly as many students studying overseas with our transnational education partners as we do in the UK. And we celebrate this diversity. For us, it's really important. It's what makes us unique. And it's what we offer individuals is the opportunity to achieve their best because of, rather than despite their backgrounds. And so education without boundaries means, obviously, it means a whole range of different things. But one of the things it means is, and I've just lost my slides, haven't I? What have I done? Have I just, oh, sorry, apologies for that. The slide just went. But education without boundaries means widening access to higher education. So it means actually enabling more of those first generation students to come into higher education. It means fighting for improved social mobility and equality, diversity and inclusivity. It means empowering our students to use their lived experience so they can stand out in the workplaces of tomorrow. And with that, it means really developing them so that they've got that confidence to walk into the workplace. So for me, it means that they are ready for work from the day that they leave the university. It means empowering our staff to be innovative and make a difference academically, commercially, and socially, and giving equal focus to local, regional, national, and global issues. And then in terms of that, we then have a set of values. And obviously our values are really important because they help us to articulate and demonstrate what we value to our community. They guide us to actually embrace behaviours that will help us to achieve what we're trying, where we're trying to get to. And they set the expectations for the whole community. We've got three: inclusive, collaborative, and impactful. And obviously we've mapped out there in a bit more detail what they mean to us, but I think they're really important for me, that being inclusive and making sure we support and celebrate everybody is really important. Being collaborative, working in partnership, working together, not treating universities as ivory towers that sit in isolation, but they're in their regions, they're working with organisations and communities. And being impactful, so very much about outcomes focused, making a real difference. And then we have four key strategic priorities. So students are at the absolute heart of what we do. So student success. And that for me is from before students arrive, actually how we work in schools, how we encourage young people to have aspirations and to achieve the best they can. And then it goes right through to their having a fantastic experience when they're at the university and then leaving and getting fantastic jobs. The second strategic priority is around inclusivity and culture, and around really nurturing and celebrating and being really proud of the university and its inclusive and the way that we actually treat each individual. And the third one is around impactful research and knowledge exchange, which is really important. It's really important about how we work, and within that, on the research side, it's obviously about having research that genuinely makes a difference to society. And we have some amazing research. I mean, another example would be some of the work we've been doing on environmental change, which is really powerful work at the moment. And then the knowledge exchange, it's working with partners like Helen at the Chambers and the FE colleges, where we can actually really look at how we can upskill, reskill, and develop people within our regions and communities. And then the fourth one is around having connected and sustainable campuses. So having really clear identities on our campuses, but actually that we're very clear that it's about the connection of the whole university, because that brings some real power with that. And what does this mean for Greenwich? Just a few words around this. I mean, one is, obviously, it's our commitments around supporting social mobility, around working with partners on campus side by side with staff and students, about creating distinctive identities. And if I just give you one example, we're very keen that Avery Hill becomes a health and wellbeing hub. And I'd like to see over time on there that we'd have some clinics which students run and the community can access, and maybe have a primary healthcare trust there as well. So it would become somewhere where the community actually can play a part in this as well as the students. And a culture that's committed to our climate change responsibilities and net zero carbon emissions is really important. And then I've just put on the other side just a couple of examples of that, which and really in many ways I've already talked about those. But for me, it's about, as we've refreshed the strategy, it's really about saying, actually, we're really proud of where we've been, and actually now this is where we want to get to, and we can build on where we've been to get there. So that's hopefully that gives you a flavour of what we've been doing. I think I've talked for half an hour, Tim. I think
Yes.
I've kept to my time scale, but hopefully that gives you a flavour. And please do ask any questions, and I'll try and answer them. And I am just going to open my door because my cat is screaming at me while we're talking. So I'll just do that. But please feel free to ask anything, and I'll stop sharing the screen now.
Okay, well, shall I thank you very much, Jane. That was a really interesting and stimulating talk. I thought it was fantastic to hear about the diversity of the student population, all the work that you've done on social mobility, how you dealt with the challenges of COVID, which I think in all of our work and professions has taken us by surprise. Really great to hear about the power of partnerships. And I suppose what strikes me is what a huge amount of responsibility you hold as Vice Chair, and really fantastic that you've come to Greenwich and brought all of that previous experience with you. Greenwich University is obviously a really key stakeholder for us and something that contributes a huge amount to Greenwich. I haven't seen any questions in the chat. I think I can physically see everyone if I'm not imagining it. So I'm very happy for people to put up their hands using the reactions button, no, or physically. I've seen you, Helen, I'm just doing the instructions. Or if you want to physically put your hands up, then that's also fine because I can see you. And first off the queue is Helen. So Helen, do ask your question.
What I would like to say, Jane, thank you so much, because I work all the time with the University of Greenwich, but you always need to have these sorts of events that really channels, so we genuinely know what people are doing. And I really commend Jane for what's been going on. And Jane, I think you've been to the hairdressers since we all. I was there on Tuesday, so I think we're all looking at the good cuts. Yes, excellent. Thank you so much, Jane. Brilliant.
Great, thanks, Helen. Has anyone got any questions they'd like to raise? Peter, do you want to speak?
Yes, I was just going to ask, the university, of course, has done a terrific job on the, in terms of its building programme, let alone the college. Obviously Stockwell Street was a major triumph. When you consider actually how it started, it started off as a sort of the silver lining that came out of a rather black cloud, which was the 2008 crash. But I just wonder, if the university's, going to need to do more building, or it's got, things that it would like to move around from one campus to another.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, Peter, that's, interesting questions. I don't think universities can ever stay still in that sense. I don't know, you may be aware, but sadly, one of the casualties of the pandemic was the De Vere's Hotel in Greenwich.
Sorry, which one? Sorry,
De Vere's.
Oh yes.
And we owned that building, and it was leased to them. So what we're doing at the moment is actually looking at how we use that building. Mm-hmm. So that's obviously a big project for us at the moment. We're also producing a master plan on all three campuses, so that we can actually have a 10-year master plan of what we want to do, and then what I'm very keen to do is that we actually then have we look at the finances, so that, I mean, at the moment the government, as you probably know, has very mixed views about higher education, and they, you know, so give you an example, when you may have heard on the news that they're taking away London weighting from teaching for university, for all universities in London. If I tell you that, that's a loss of 2.5 million to us overnight. That gives you an idea of some of the scale of those changes that they're making. And so we need to, so what I'm very keen to do is that we have a financial plan that enables us to speed up or slow down depending on some of those changes. But you're absolutely right. Of course, we shouldn't assume that subjects will always stay where they are and where they're located. And we're looking at the moment about actually where we would get better synergies by actually working together. And is some of that about having some greater closeness geographically? And there's also lots of other options. I think one of the things I have discovered since I've moved here is that probably a week doesn't go by when I'm not offered a building or a piece of space to actually consider, which is fantastic actually, because it does mean that there's lots of opportunities for us.
Yes, I mean, my question was, it was a slightly loaded one in the sense that I came out of the University of Manchester originally, where in about 1963 or 4, the university built what's actually still a very modern university theatre. And it's just that, and it's certainly not something which I would advocate, you know, rushing into. But let's put it like this: the viability of Greenwich Theatre has always been slightly dodgy. It has its good times and its bad times. But my experience as somebody who comes out of 2 theatre schools, in fact, Manchester and Bristol, is that you know, at some distant future point, you know, it's the sort of ideal place that would make a very good university theatre, where most of the year it's used for what it's used for at the moment, which is, you know, a changing program. But the university reserves a certain number of weeks so that it's drama school. I mean, you have got a theatre school, but it's down at Chatham, I think, you know, down at Pembroke.
No, it's actually in Bathway and Woolwich.
Oh, it's now moved, has it? Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was a building. That was a building I saw in the dockyard a long time ago. Let's put it like that. But you know, it's just, I mean, that was the slight thought, but nothing else. I mean, yeah.
No, we're exploring all of those different avenues to look at, and that would, and that, I mean, I've said to everybody, nothing's off the table, because we need to explore everything. So yeah, then we are looking at that amongst many other things.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Peter. That was a really interesting question. I've got questions from Richard and then Lizanne. So if we could go to Richard, please. Richard first.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jane, for your talk, which was very good. I got 2 questions. One is to ask how dependent the university is financially on overseas students, what the outlook for overseas students is. And I guess there are 2 components. There are students who come from overseas to Greenwich, and then, as you mentioned, there are students who study overseas, but under the aegis of Greenwich University. The other was about mentoring. I know that the law department provide, I think, local people to act as mentors to members of the law department, students in the law department. I wondered whether there was scope for a wider scheme embracing other departments, and whether people in the local community could play a part in that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Richard. If I answer the mentoring question first, because we actually have a very good mentoring scheme that covers the whole of the business school, and what we're always looking for local people to act as mentors. And when we refresh the strategy, one of the things we're committing to is that every student will have a mentor made available to them. Now, in order to achieve that, we do need to have more mentors. So I'm very, very keen to do that, and certainly what I could do is let Tim or Jonathan actually have some of the details of who to speak to about that if anybody's interested, because that would be great if more people were interested. Now, in terms of dependency on international income, we do have a very healthy international income, and nearly 20% of our students are international. So there is no doubt that if they were to disappear tomorrow, that would be hugely challenging. In terms of the transnational education, we have a large number of students studying abroad, but actually the income for that is much lower. So that would have less of an impact. But what I would say is that our students are relatively diverse. So we're not completely reliant on one country, which is where some universities have come unstuck. About 10 years ago, when the government stopped allowing post-study of 2 years after a student had graduated, literally overnight, the Indian market disappeared. And for about a period of about 5 years, there were hardly any Indian students coming to the UK. Now that's now changed. And the other country, obviously, that you wouldn't want to be completely over-reliant on is China, because that's very fragile in terms of the future. So we have so I suppose in answer to your question, we do have international students. We are reliant on that income, but we are looking at ways that we can manage the risk by actually ensuring that they're spread across many different countries. And already some of that risk is mitigated because of that.
Great, thanks Richard for that question. I should say that I was on the mentoring scheme at one point, so I was mentoring law students, which I really enjoyed actually. It felt really two-way, and I found for me it was just trying to use all of my connections, which they didn't always, having different connections to the students themselves. So I think Lizanne was the next questioner, please.
Yes, thanks, John. I was also a volunteer for the mentoring scheme. I thought it was really great to reach out to local businesses and charities to do that. So I hope that does start up again post-COVID. I was wondering if you could give us a few more details about how the university contributed to the eradication of the river blindness in so many countries, because that sounds really fascinating.
Yeah. I'll have a go. I'm not a scientist myself, so just to say, it wasn't my research. I mean, it was the Natural Resources Institute, and it was they've done a huge amount of work on sort of, if you like, food security and actually health within African countries. And they had it was work that they did on the tsetse fly and how to eliminate that. So I can't actually tell you much more about that without getting one of them to talk to you. But actually, if you did want a fascinating talk another time, it would be worth getting someone from the Natural Resources Institute, because they've done all sorts of interesting things. So, you know, for example, cassava is obviously a staple food within many parts of Africa. It's also a food that actually has very, very limited shelf life. And they've managed to create some edible protection that gives it a longer shelf life than it would have otherwise. They also have, another thing they've done is they've been looking at actually how do you eradicate rats, which are a real pest in some countries, and they've been doing that by making them infertile. And a lot of that work, I think that some of that work's been reported in the newspapers. So it's a very humane way of actually trying to reduce that population. So their work has won 4 Queen's Anniversary Prizes, which, if I tell you that the only university that has more Queen's Anniversary Prizes than the University of Greenwich is Oxford University, it'll give you a flavour for quite how impactful their work's been. So that doesn't really help, Lizanne, because I'm not giving you the absolute details, because I'd need to get them to come and do that. But hopefully that gives you a flavour for some of the things they're doing.
That was really helpful, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Suzanne, for that question. Thanks, Jane. I couldn't remember what caused river blindness. So if it's the tsetse fly, that adds to my knowledge on that. Helen, is it a new hand that you've got up, or is that an old hand?
Sorry, it's a new hand. I just want to, for Jane's information, I just want to sort of slightly answer Pete's question, because the university, apologies, the Greenwich Theatre is still waiting to get a lease, an official lease from the Royal Borough of Greenwich, who probably pleading COVID at the moment. And I do know that Tim's been involved over the years, as has Richard. So the Greenwich Theatre are waiting for a lease from Greenwich Council, who own the building.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
And on my personal front, I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, and I've done quite a bit of mentoring over the years, I think mainly with your postgraduate PR students, and I'm happy to continue. So that was just my little bit. So I'll put my hand down now.
Great, thank you. I think the next questioner was from Stephen, and then we'll have Tim. So Stephen next, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, James. That was good to hear how things are moving ahead despite the difficulties you've been facing at the university over the last 12 months. Can I just to tell everybody, I think the only one in the room that's an alumni of the university. It was the best opportunity for me when I didn't do very well at school. In fact, it was the only opportunity for me. And it was through, I must say, I had a fantastic education there. I'm still in touch with my tutor 40 years later. And with a lot of friends that I got there. It helped me to my first job in housing, I think a little bit accidentally, but so I owe it an enormous amount. I'm really pleased to hear that the widening participation and keeping that diversity and that strength of the university is very much one of your priorities and very much in your mind. I think it's something that makes the university very different. I'll never forget sort of standing in the degree ceremonies and seeing the diversity, and then going to my children's universities, all members of the Russell Group, and seeing how undiverse they were. So I think it's fantastic and making a huge contribution. My question really is about, you mentioned government policies. What are going to be the impacts of government policies? I'm not sure I understand what government policies are at the moment. Oh, I suppose I ought to declare an interest. I'm also chair of London and South East colleges, which has got Greenwich Community College, Bromley and Bexley in its orbit. So we have a good partnership with the university.
Thanks, Stephen. And we're actually developing that partnership at the moment. We've got a whole list of projects we're all going to work on together, which is great. But I mean, government policy is quite confusing at the moment, isn't it? I mean, obviously, London waiting is one example of taking that away. The government at the moment, there was a report that came out about a year ago called the Auger Review, and that was really focused on well, it was a proposal that basically, if I go backtrack from it, it came from a position that the student loan company isn't affordable in the long term. So therefore, what do you do about that? And what Auger was proposing was that students shouldn't pay what they're currently paying in terms of for the university, but that the university should be topped up to actually enable them to still get that money. Of course, one of the suggestions from the government is that students shouldn't pay, but they shouldn't be topped up. And so at the moment, we're waiting still to hear about that. Now, if that comes in, the difficulty that will happen then is that a lot of courses that you would want to see in a university, where you want to see the full spread, become really challenging to deliver. So courses that historically in a place like Greenwich that would have small numbers, say history or creative writing, that I think are really important, and all the arts I think are really important, become much more challenging. So a lot of the work we've been doing because Greenwich is part of the University Alliance, and I'm a director of the University Alliance as Vice Chancellor, and a lot of the work we've been doing is actually really talking to the government about the importance of universities like ours that have a very clear professional and technical focus, but also make such, as you actually said, Stephen, make such a massive difference to people's lives, and how important that is to not lose sight of that, because quite often when the government is talking, what most of them understand is the Russell Group. In fact, most of them understand Oxford and Cambridge, and then at best the Russell Group, and they find universities like Greenwich very difficult to understand. So some of the things we've also been doing is inviting actually as many of the ministers as we can to come and visit, because I think it's much easier for them to understand it when they've seen it and they've seen what we do. But for me, it's the danger is that the government starts to actually play FE off with HE, and I think that's really unhealthy, because actually you need a vibrant FE sector and you need a vibrant HE sector. You don't want to play them off each other.
Thank you, Jane. Could I say I was a history graduate in the humanities at Greenwich, so I didn't do the technical side, and actually there's a good record on that course. For instance, Nina Stibbe, who's done really well writing and producing things for television as a graduate. So I think that's really good. What you said about education policy, it sort of comes to mind, that phrase, educating other people's children, which is sort of, it seems to drive government policies sometimes. Anyway.
Thanks, Stephen. I think, Tim, did you have your hand up with a question?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to say how remarkable I thought it was that in terms of the anniversary prizes, Greenwich was second only to Oxford. And I noticed from one of the slides, Jane, that we had 4 of those anniversary prizes. I wondered whether they were given for work throughout the entire faculty, or were they for specific pieces of individual research? Because it's a major achievement.
They're given to they're awarded to the whole university, but they're awarded for specific work. So 3 of them were awarded for work that was done in the Natural Resources Institute.
I see.
And 1 of them was for work that was done around fire security. So they're given to teams, would be probably the most accurate thing.
Well, it's a great achievement.
Yeah, I'm told they've got 2 more up their sleeve.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Peter again.
Yeah, it's a completely different subject, but sort of just an operational one. I mean, how do you find it? I mean, assuming normal times rather than COVID times. I mean, what do you find the sort of general challenges are of operating on the ORNC site? I mean, there's clearly things like, you know, the foundation has to raise money by filming, for example, which means that the place is suddenly cluttered up with Pantechnicons and Winnebagos and hairy guys driving carriages and bringing in, you know, whatever it is. But I mean, this is a fairly disruptive. I mean, do you manage? I mean, are there particular challenges there, or how do you think things could be sort of improved a bit, given that it's also a tourist site?
There's actually, I mean, there's been some filming in lockdown, but
sure.
But there wasn't any filming prior to lockdown. That when I first arrived. I mean, there's no. I mean, the students actually. I mean, part of the attraction of coming is that they've seen the site in many films. So there's that side of it. It's not that disruptive, if I'm honest. I mean, there's the odd time where you're not allowed to walk through the main thoroughfare, but that's very rare. And actually, one of the things that we do have is a very good relationship with the Old Royal Naval College, purposely to actually support that, and with Matthew. In terms of the challenges, I would say the biggest challenge is actually enabling the teaching to be modern. And some of the internal sides of the buildings are not really fit for purpose for modern teaching. And yet we have huge restrictions on what we can do to adapt them. And that's the biggest challenge. And that will be an ongoing challenge. The second thing I'd say is a massive challenge is the lack of signage. Because there's rules of what we can and can't put up there, but it makes the university quite invisible, and that's a pity. But one of the obviously the attractions of Devonport House is that we will be able to make the university more visible there.
Yes, I mean, that'll be interesting because, you know, there is a stalled scheme there. It was very minor for improving the interpretation of the tombs and things which are there, like the mausoleum. When you get round to it, I've got it all safely stashed away. But I mean, obviously, it would be good to be able to open those grounds up a bit better than they are at the moment.
Yeah, and I'd like to be able to do that as well. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Peter. I'm conscious how long we're keeping you, Jane, but I think Helen, if you've got a question.
I have a new hand. I've got a few bits to say. Can I just also, sorry? Oh, sorry. It sounded as if someone was groaning when I was speaking. I'd just like to give, and Jane knows this, but London South East College also won an award at the Queen's anniversary. That lovely, you know, we all met up at the Guildhall, and LSEC won it for their work in construction in Greenwich. So I think that's an accolade we'd like to, you know, I'd like to everyone to know.
It's got the picture up.
And we
Helen.
know the filming and the signage, Pete, goes on forever. We've all worked on this. And yeah, that I just really wanted to, I've actually, yeah. And Devonport, that is an ongoing issue. But it's a great element. And Pete, I can assure you that I've been in touch with the University of Greenwich about the, you know, the statues in the mausoleum. I'm still on the case privately.
Okay, thanks, Helen. Is there any final question for Jane? No, I think we've lost Tim, so I think what it remains for me to do is to thank Professor Jane Harrington for joining us tonight for a really, really interesting talk. Really enjoyed it. I feel as though I've learned a lot about the university, about the size of the university and all the different aspects to it, and also your plans for the future. Really fantastic to hear about all the inclusivity and your other values. So really big thank you from me. I think we should maybe thank Jane in the usual way, which is maybe take your mutes off and we can clap.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.